We're also doing everything we can to prepare for a safe reopening. CDOT has crews on the ground 24/7, making sure the closures are safe and manning the gates, conducting detours and keeping motorists away from danger, while at the same time finding ways to move traffic and commerce on the appropriate routes and supporting firefighting operations. We also have engineering crews from our CDOT staff and FHWA assessing our infrastructure, including bridges, to determine if there was any damage. Our rockfall mitigation crew is assessing fire impacts to the rock faces, and they will assess on the ground and by air. They will look for vegetation loss and where rocks are exposed due to the heat of the fire and how that could impact the loosening of rocks. Appropriate mitigation measures will take place if necessary. One real good point of emphasis I want to make is our Hanging Lake Tunnel Operations Center, which was previously evacuated, reopened yesterday to CDOT staff. This was a prerequisite from everyone involved to opening the road. We are working on restaging fire response operations out of the roadway where it is safe and possible. For example, we have a portable fire retardant station that is located currently on the interstate on the westbound structure that will be moving off the road as the IMT team doesn't need it exactly where it's at right now. Responder camps are being also moved out of the rest areas because they're utilizing those for man camps, and they've been situated there for easy access, but they will be able to start moving those out. Aerial operations remain a key consideration for what's going on currently in the canyon. We need those to fight the fire, but those flights cannot go back and forth across the road while the road is open to traffic. We're hopeful that the next few days will enable a shift in operations such that those overflights aren't needed. We're doing everything we can to work to expedite with CDOT, CDPS, and the entire incident command working together to balance the tremendous inconvenience of this extended closure with firefighting needs and the safety of the traveling public. We will work with the teams involved to make sure the interstate, its structures and slopes are as safe as possible prior to reopening. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Harrelson, CDOT's chief engineer, and he can provide more insight on the corridor. Steve?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, good. While we do everything to make our roads as safe as possible, I-70 goes through a mountain corridor, and you know, even in the best of times, it can be an extreme situation. But when fires like this happen, the need for safe behavior is heightened. I would encourage everyone when traveling up there to slow down, don't follow too closely, and don't drive aggressively. As Shoshana said, our overarching responsibility is to ensure the safety of both motorists and the firefighters. We appreciate the public safety. I'd like to touch briefly on the geologic and structural issues we are tracking, both to reopen the road and then to monitor it going forward. The landslide and rockfall risks are real, both right now and then also moving into the coming months. This fire has destabilized the slopes, and even after we reopen the road, we're going to have to do extensive monitoring to make sure we're ready to handle it. CDOT's working on plans to bolster long-term resiliencies for both sediment fall and avalanches. But in the meantime, our geohazard experts are making sure we continue to identify loose rocks that could pose a threat to the travelers and scaling them down as necessary. We also have more than 40 bridges and viaducts that carry I-70 through Glenwood Canyon. Our bridge inspection team has been up there since late last week, just a couple days after the fire hit, and has been inspecting these bridges to see what kind of damage there was. The good news is I think the early indications are that the temperatures on the concrete bridges were not so high that they could compromise the structural integrity. So that's very positive news. We're going to, as the canyon opens up and the incident commanders let us in there better, we're going to confirm that and continue to look at those bridges in all corners of the canyon and make sure that they're safe. The other big concern we have are debris flows, and as the vegetation in the canyon has burned up, that allows the debris flow, the soil in the canyon to be destabilized. So if we get some big rainstorms or through this fall and through this winter, we're going to have to monitor that. We're also working with the Forest Service. They analyze the slopes and identify areas that were more substantially burned, and flag those for us to be aware of, to make sure that if debris flows do happen, we'll be able to either mitigate them, or also if they do happen, we can take care of them. Being in the middle of the mountains and driving on a road between rock faces are precautions motorists should always take. But in this climate, this hot weather, you need to remember about fire dangers, weather conditions, and travel conditions before you head out. Prepare accordingly. And we need all of the public to take these precautions. If you're a smoker, keep your cigarette butts in your car. Be mindful of hot catalytic converters on weeds if you pull over on the shoulder, and dangling chains or other pieces of steel or iron that can cause sparks. Anything that causes a spark can spark a fire. I'm going to pass it over to John Lorme, our statewide director of maintenance, and he'll talk about some of our maintenance forces.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Lorme, and as Steve said, I'm the director of maintenance and operations. And from a statewide approach, CDOT maintenance crews are prepared for almost anything, which means we're prepared to support wildlife firefighting operations anywhere or throughout the entire state of Colorado. You might not know this, but we do a lot more in CDOT than just patch potholes and plow snow. Our maintenance crews are experienced heavy equipment operators, and thus we become a prize asset to support wildfire response operations, and we're often requested for assistance for just that. We maintain a large fleet of heavy equipment like bulldozers, motor graders, excavators, water tankers, and lowboys, traffic control vehicles. Additionally, we're well rehearsed in incident management, and our command and control assets are often requested as well. And we provide valuable support for firefighting operations. So we do a lot more than just set up detours. CDOT is prepared for these types of emergencies. We're prepared for these types of emergencies by conducting additional training each year to ensure our operators can safely work within a fire zone on the highway, alongside first responders, in the middle of a wildfire, which is kind of out of what you would think would be out of our norm, but we actually prepare for it and do it almost every year. Currently, under the leadership of our executive director, we've already spoken with and are continuously engaged with our federal partners, neighboring state DOTs, city and county DPWs, and law enforcement partners like CSP, and almost all of the local sheriff offices that are involved or in the proximity of the fires in the surrounding areas. We're also heavily engaged and communicate with our freight partners, all in an effort to manage and minimize the impacts of these closures that they have on our system and reduce the inconvenience to the traveling public. Besides safety, it's one of our foremost missions, if you will. Maintenance crews have been staged at road closures and along these detour routes to address any concerns and to ensure traffic is moving as smoothly as possible, because it just seems that sometimes when you have restricted travel, that's when all the incidents pop up. So we've forward deployed additional assets to make sure that things are running smoothly on all these detour routes. Our state operations center in Golden is in continuously messaging, communicating, and working with our neighboring state traffic operations centers to ensure travelers are aware of closures long before they ever get within 500 miles of Colorado. If you find yourself out on the plains, you will see VMS boards lit up in Kansas and Nebraska, letting everyone know that I-70 is closed and we're currently experiencing wildfires. Currently supporting operations throughout the state, DMO and its subsidiary departments like emergency management are supporting 3 large wildfires. As my colleagues previously addressed, the Grizzly Creek Fire, which is impacting I-70, the Pine Gulch Fire, the second largest in state history now, is impacting Highway 139, and then the Cameron Pass Fire that's impacting Highway 14 as well. Both the Grizzly and the Pine Gulch fires, CDOT emergency management teams are forward deployed with equipment operators, transporting bulk water and transporting bulk water and supporting operations for Region 3 maintenance and our incident command teams. We are also actively supporting the Cameron Pass Fire with closure points and providing bulk water to the firefighters up there as well. As an organization, we're always shifting resources around to address current and forecasted need. In this particular case, we pre-position equipment that we believe we need or we know we're going to need. In this case, we've shifted bulldozers, loaders, mobile VMS boards, light plants, water tankers, and personnel to Region 3 to help support them in their efforts. We're also planning for possibility of future mudslides as a result of these massive fire burn scars. And we'll be shifting additional resources in the future, like excavators and loaders, in these areas as well to help address and make sure that these large mudslides or debris flows don't impact the road systems any more than they have to. So, and on a personal note, I'm really, really proud of the CDOT team, especially the maintenance operators. They're highly adaptive and responsive, and we almost answer every single call for help that we get. So, in a few months, these same men and women will be fighting old man winter as he returns. So whether it's cutting in fire breaks or plowing snow during blizzards or clearing mudslides or rebuilding roads after washouts, or even just repairing road guardrail that's been damaged next to traffic that's moving 75 miles an hour, these men and women are always on call and ready to serve Colorado. And they're often the best that CDOT has to offer. And they really represent us amazingly well in these challenging times. So with that, and to stop boasting a little bit, and I'll turn it over to our Region 5 Transportation Director, Mike McBaugh.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thanks, Mike.
Okay. So this is really a unique situation this year because we have 5 regions in Colorado, and we basically we have all 5 regions providing assistance for these fires in one form or another. For the southern part of the state, for Region 2 and Region 5, we're really the detour support for this whole operation and what's going on. We're assisting with moving traffic along the southern detour route. If you're driving east to west across central Colorado, the recommended detour route is US 50 and US 285 to make that movement, particularly between Denver and Grand Junction. We have work to keep the traffic flowing, but motorists should be prepared for delays. It takes around 6 hours from Denver to Grand Junction with clear roads on these detour routes. So it's not going to be as quick as you would usually see on I-70. Any traffic delays due to crashes can extend this drive time significantly. If everyone can plan ahead for the trip and be patient while traveling, we can keep the delays to a minimum and get people to their destinations much more safely and much more quickly. This is the best route because the other more primitive routes will not be able to handle traffic as effectively. That's partly why we've talked about don't always trust your app to get you to a location because it may take you over a pass. And if you don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle, that may not be the route that you can get over. Since the detour has been in place, we've been able to keep people moving smoothly through adjustments in our signal timing and suspending construction work along the route. What we've seen on this route, particularly if you look at the central part of the corridor around Buena Vista, we generally see about 10 to 12,000 vehicles a day, and that's on average. And there's spikes, on weekends, et cetera. But what we've seen during the week since I-70 closed is about a 15% increase in traffic, which is about 2,000 vehicles a day. The one thing that we see about the 2,000 vehicles, though, is it's concentrated in about an 8-hour window. So it's not spread equally over 24 hours. It's in that 8-hour window. So we're seeing anywhere from 200 to 500 vehicles more an hour on the corridor. The corridor can handle that traffic. Our signal timing has been adjusted to handle that traffic, and it works well. But if you have an accident or if you have inattentiveness that create an accident, and these roads don't have a lot of detour routes for themselves, that can create big delays. And we've had a couple accidents that have happened, and we've had some extended delays. But in all, things are moving smoothly. Things are working quite well right now. And our crews are very ready with the State Patrol to make sure that we keep that going. We ask that people be safe traveling. We want them to stay alert when they are traveling because these roads aren't the same. They don't all have nice shoulders and a lot of width for people to work with. And be patient with the increased detour traffic. One of the things that we've noticed on the road, the few accidents that we've had have been because people have been aggressive, trying to make passes, taking chances, and we need people to stop doing that and be patient and go with the flow. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That is it for our planned briefing. We do have some time for questions. Know that there's a number of outlets who are on the line. If you could please use the raise hand function on the participant lists. For most of us, that's the button down towards the bottom of the screen. We'll make it just a little easier to manage virtually. Already seeing one up, so let's go ahead and get things started. Art Riddle, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, that is correct. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Art Riddle, I'm the mayor of the town of Newcastle, and I just want to share my very appreciation to CDOT. This isn't the first rodeo that we've gone through in the last several decades up here with the closure of Glenwood Canyon. And I just want to mention that CDOT has a great deal of wisdom with their maintenance crew, their engineers, and I just want to let everybody know that we are very appreciative of what CDOT does. And this is a very difficult situation, obviously, with interstate commerce, and we get it, but this is something that in our community we live with, not every year, but quite often. And I just want to thank CDOT for everything that they do.
Thank you, Mayor Riddle, and obviously a lot more to come.
Thank you.
Got a list going here, so we'll keep it in order. Seeing Jennifer Meckles with 9 News. Please go ahead.
I have a 2-part question. One has somewhat been answered already, but I'll just ask for clarity. Early on, we heard days, not weeks, as far as expected reopening. Any clarification on maybe how many days or loosely when we're thinking, number one? And then number 2, I've heard some talk about like historic length of closures from previous incidents. I'm just curious if we know if this is now one of the longest or the longest closure for I-70 that you guys know about, or if that's totally off base. Just some interest in the history side of closure. Thanks.
I'll take the first question and turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about the history. I think we're looking at probably several days, but we're doing everything possible to expedite it. And one of the reasons we're not giving a date certain is that the weather over the next 24 to 48 hours is going to be very critical in terms of determining it. So, particularly the storms that are expected to come in are going to have quite a significant bearing on whether the operations teams plans as they are currently laid out are feasible. So I think by this time, potentially even tomorrow, we'll have a better sense. But again, within the week, I think is what we're looking at, and hopefully less, not more. The other piece that I would just add to that is the steps that Mike Goolsby walked through are all steps that needed to happen to sort of pre-position operations for being able to open again. So a lot of the work on steps that have to happen before we can open is happening right now. So that's steps like getting people back in Hanging Lake Tunnel, getting some of the fire operations out of the road and sort of into alternate sites. Working with the folks who are doing the aerial fire missions to think about the hours. So a lot, and then of course Mike mentioned the traffic, rewriting the traffic detours. Because of the construction project, we've been operating only on one half of the road anyway, so we have to get the crew back in to work that. So all of those steps are kind of on the critical path to opening it, and that's all happening. And there's been a lot of progress in the last 24 hours. So hopefully that provides a little more light and give not a precise answer, but somewhat closer. Mike, you want to talk about the history a little?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, this is the longest closure of Glenwood Canyon. This is at least in the 25 years I've been with the department. I actually started in Glenwood Canyon back in 1995 at Hanging Lake Tunnel. The only reason I bring that up is I have a very unique affinity for the tunnel itself and the canyon, and I can honestly tell you that I won't be sad to see it go when I retire. But with that being said, the 2 major rock falls, the one that happened during Thanksgiving, and I don't remember the exact date, and then the other major rock fall that happened back in 2008, both of those were right at 7 days, just out of a week. And so today is day 10 of the Grizzly Creek fire. So we're in uncharted territory.
So just to be clear, it would probably be most accurate to say longest closure we know for Glenwood Canyon. I didn't know if that extends for all of I-70 closures of history, but maybe at the very least Glenwood Canyon, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speak for the entirety of I-70, but I would definitely speak that this is probably the longest one in Glenwood Canyon.
At least since you've known, which has been, like you said, decades.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
You're
guys.
welcome.
Thanks, Jennifer. Next, raising his hand, we have Ron Milhorn. Please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. For the record, I was in that big rock fall in February 2016. I remember I was about 100 yards behind that. Shoshana, you mentioned that you warned that people shouldn't try to drive through the closure. Have people actually tried? That's one part of my question. The other part is there any chance that there might be access to funds to help some of the communities that have been impacted by the closure in terms of lost commerce, etc.?
On the first question, folks have generally been pretty good about not trying to get into the closure area. We have had a number of accidents within the closure, mostly response vehicles. It's some of them because just the fire itself is very distracting for people, and there have been irregular driving even within the vehicles for whom it is allowed. Early on in the first few days, we had some problems, less on 70 than on Independence Pass, with vehicles that were going in places that were not designed for them. So the reason we had to close Independence at the outset of the incident was because we had a number of trucks for whom it was not designed, sometimes getting stuck at the top. I think we had to turn around something like 75 trucks that weren't to be going on the pass in the beginning. And we are appreciative that the new orientation on that is working much better now. I think, Mike, is there anything you would want to add before we move to the next topic?
No, Shoshana, I was going to touch on the Independence Pass piece and the fact that we still have commercial vehicles trying to get through up there. Not as much now that we've implemented some things with our partners with the State Patrol, and it's gotten better. We've had a few people come up with some very ingenious stories to try to get through I-70, but just due to the amount of movement and fire response that's going on in there, we've been pretty limited on who we let in and who we let through.
So to your second question regarding federal funds, there is a program operated through the Federal Highway Administration that is focused on addressing emergency damage due to natural disasters to roadways. It's the program through which we accessed funds after the flooding in the north several years back. And it's designed for this kind of thing. So there is some chance that we might be able to access some of those funds in the future. One of the challenges that we are working through, which was mentioned in this discussion, is that some of the potential damage to the roadway is yet to come. I mean, thankfully, as Steve mentioned, the structural damage right now seems to be relatively minimal. But because of the vulnerability to mudslides, rockfall, avalanches, there is a significant resiliency risk that is created because of the burn in the canyon. So part of what we're trying to do right now is assess what that risk looks like for the next several years and start to think about what we need to do to fortify the road for the duration. So that kind of analysis will help us in potentially proceeding to access some of those federal funds.
Shoshana, if I could, one thing for everyone that we talk about the debris flow and we talk about the amount of moisture that it's going to take to possibly cause those debris flows. And one of the things that when we met with the Forest Service today and their experts, there's a couple areas out there right now that if they take a 1/4 inch an hour rainfall in those areas and it's concentrated in those areas, we will have debris flow. So that's not a lot of water. So that tells you how some areas out there are severely damaged from a vegetation and ground standpoint.
Next, we have Nathaniel Miner. Nate, please unmute and go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is really for whoever has been in the canyon the most. I just wonder if you could describe what it looks like. I think a lot of us have been through there and know what it looked like the week before last, but what does it look like now?
You want me to take that one, Shoshana?
Yes, and I was going to offer that we can follow up with some pictures.
Yeah. So, Nate, it's if you're traveling on the eastbound portion of the interstate right now, which we have head-to-head traffic running because of the construction project, you're not going to think that it really is that impactful other than if you look up on the slopes. If you're up on the westbound portion of it, it's apocalyptic. There's areas up there that it's destroyed. It's terrible, and it pains me to see it. I know that there's quite a few people that I've been that have gone through the canyon from a CDOT perspective and other agency partners, and I can tell you that it brings definitely an emotional response when they see it. I had somebody specifically tell me they went through it and cried when they saw it. So there's some areas up there that are pretty bad. And to preface that, there's Xcel Energy lost approximately, and this is a rough number, don't quote me on this, but upwards of 40 power poles in that area. So it's pretty bad.
And Nate, to that question, and to Shoshana's point, we'll be sure to follow up with some media resources, pictures, videos if we have them, etc. We have one more hand currently raised. That's Peter Bauman. Please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, this is Peter with the Post Independent. Two questions. First one, obviously the Glenwood Canyon construction project is not going to be finished on the regular timeline in October here, but I'm curious if there's any assessment on the overall impacts to that $15.7 million project so far. Second question is, a couple of times tonight and also in community meetings throughout the week, there's been a reference to, there's a list of things or a number of things that need to be accomplished before I-70 can reopen. Would it be possible to just get a detailed list of those various things that need to occur? For example, the Xcel polls that were just referenced prior to this.
Shoshana, do you want me to jump on the first part of that question or all of it?
Go ahead.
Peter, so the first part of that, fortunately, the engineering project that was going on the westbound portion of the canyon was actually a little bit ahead of schedule. So that's a benefit. There has been some damage to the new polyester concrete that was put down, and that's some of the stuff that we're evaluating right now. Fortunately, that's one of the things that we're looking at is how fast we can get the contractor back in there to do some of that work in conjunction with Xcel doing some of their power line work. I'm very hopeful that the project itself will wrap up about the same time frame. One of the areas that may be somewhat limited or somewhat slowed down is the LED project in no-name tunnels, just due to the fact that was that was a separate part of the concrete project, but they can work if we get the westbound open back up in a timely manner. For the second part of that, the criteria that we've utilized with the incident management team and our partners, some of those are variables, and part of that is the weather. Knowing that we were going to have rain yesterday and today, and we received some of that so far, not knowing if that was going to create any debris flows. First and foremost on that list was assessing any rockfall areas or any additional rocks that were coming down. If you were on the westbound portion of the interstate right now, we're experiencing rockfall daily, if not hourly in some locations. The biggest one for me was getting our staff back to the Hanging Lake Tunnels Operations Center. There's some federal things that go along with that as far as having that staffed and manned and being able to run some of the safety systems that are in the tunnel so that we can safely transport traffic through it. That was a big one to me. The other one was working with the IMT team to make sure that we could relocate air operations and not impact them, specifically for the no-name drainage. As you well know, being in Glenwood Springs, that's one of the most important things to all you folks in Glenwood Springs, and we didn't want to hamper that operation and cause them more time to respond if they needed to quickly. Shoshana briefly spoke of it earlier, getting the traffic control back up and repaired. A bunch of the signs were destroyed in the fire, getting those things taken care of, pre-placing our equipment so that we can respond to debris flows. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I apologize, but there's 7 or 8 criteria that we have discussed with the other stakeholders and with the IMT, but those are the main ones that come to mind off the top of my head that are major things that we have to do before we can open the canyon, in addition to the inspections and making sure the infrastructure is safe to be able to do so.
Thanks, Mike. We have one remaining question. It is a follow-up from Jennifer Meckles. Jennifer, please go ahead and unmute again.
Hello again, thank you. I heard somebody earlier talking about, I believe Cottonwood Pass, correct? Is that, I'm just trying to figure out if that's open or not.
It is not, Jennifer, and the reason for that is one, for fire operations, because they thought the fire was going to head that way. 2, currently they're utilizing it for firefighting activities, and 3, they're utilizing it for essential personnel between the 2 counties to get them back and forth to be able to either go to hospitals or other things.
Okay, reason I asked that is we've heard, I'm sure you guys have too, a lot of people, a particular person there had somebody try to use that as a detour with a big truck. That truck tipped, she's got somebody blocking her yard. I'm sure you've heard some of these stories and other detour routes as well. Just you've made an appeal to drivers, but you've also got people who live along these routes that are kind of stuck with the knucklehead drivers. Any comment on their nightmare, if you will?
I would just say that we are very sympathetic to what they're going through. And I think that one of the reasons that we implore people to follow the main detours that can handle the traffic is for the people in the small communities who need to use those smaller routes, and who frankly have equipped their vehicle fleet to be able to use them. So particularly given the rugged terrain of a lot of these alternate routes, and the very significant risks of getting stuck anytime, but particularly when first responders are tied up with fire response, and the plight that the communities who are along these routes are through. Please use the detours that are listed by GoTrip. Thanks.
Jennifer, one more follow-up to Shoshana's point. Matt and his staff have been working diligently with all of the navigation companies to try and not use those as the preferred alternate route. We've been successful to a point, and then it reverts back to those being acceptable routes. And Matt and his staff have worked tirelessly to try to get that taken care of. And it's helped a whole bunch to prevent some of those things from happening.
Thanks, Jennifer. A couple more hands raised, so we'll keep moving along. Ryan Highland is next. If you want to go ahead and unmute, thanks.
Thanks. I just was looking for a clarification. I heard some really good advice from Mr. Harrelson about all drivers, let's slow down, let's use an extra measure of caution, prepare, think about your trip, think about fire prevention if you've got that trailer or if you're a smoker. But sitting in Summit County, we're in the fortunate position right now, at least at this moment, we don't have a fire, and we do have the I-70 corridor, which at least into Summit has not been impacted. And so I heard that cautionary advice, but I also saw today a number of comments from CDOT representatives really encouraging people not to head out to the mountains right now. That's a direct quote. And so just wondering, and maybe a request in future messaging, that it might be more specifically aimed at some of these areas of concern, because in Summit County, we are in a different position, and we're hoping to see visitors, obviously, right now. So just wondering. And then just a quick follow-up. I keep hearing Cottonwood Pass. If maybe someone might want to address, I think there are 2 areas with that same name. And so I think there's some confusion about which pass we're hearing about sometimes. Thank you.
Sure, just to clarify on the Cottonwood Pass issue, this is Cottonwood Pass connecting Eagle and Garfield counties. Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong there.
That's correct, Matt. And the other one, for whatever reason, doesn't show up as a viable alternate route for I-70, even if you're on 285 and 50 for some reason. It's interesting.
I think we're showing one more raised hand. The Zoom moniker here is Dennis. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. It's Dennis Webb at the Grand Junction Sentinel. I hope you can hear me. Quickly to follow up on Cottonwood Pass, I believe there, over the years, at least once or more, there's been discussions between Garfield and Eagle counties and CDOT about whether there might be some viability of making improvements on Cottonwood Pass so it could actually serve as something of a relief valve alternate route for situations like this last 10 days. Just wondering if you think such discussions or some kind of an exploration of an alternate route for such situations might arise again involving Cottonwood Pass or maybe some other approach.
This is Shoshana. I don't think we can comment on specific routes right now, but kind of big picture, we know that we have a vulnerability in that there's not a great alternate route to I-70, and I think that what we're seeing the past week and a half sort of shows us what that resiliency challenge is, right? And we see it in the snowstorm when we have to close the canyon. We see it in the much shorter events, but going through this, I think it brings into keen view that there is this single point through point A to point B that does create a resiliency challenge for the east-west thoroughfare.
We're seeing no further hands raised. I'll give it a few more seconds just to make sure that everyone has a chance. I know we've been going for quite a while so far. Just so outlets are aware here, we've also been simulcasting this to YouTube, so the feed will remain available and will be immediately linked on CDOT's YouTube page, particularly if you need to go back and reference any piece of the recording. We also have contact information from the original media advisory. Please feel free to utilize that with any additional follow-ups. Seeing no further questions, we'll let everyone get back to their evenings. Thanks again for joining us all here this evening virtually.
Okay, very good. Matt, do you need anything else from me?